Hello, frequent flower subscribers. It's Sarah back with another edition of What to Do with Your Flowers this month from Main Street Florist. So we are still in the season of fall, which is our favorite, and we've got some fun flowers for you this month. We are going to be using Amarathus. This color is called Hot Biscuit, which I love, super fun to work with. We are working with Safflower, which to me, I don't know if you're a child of the 80s, these remind you, or a parent who had children in the 80s, they remind me of little Fraggles. So I'm excited to work with those. And then we've also got some Gerbera Daisies, or Gerbera Daisies. We call them Gerbs or Gerber Daisies here in the shop for short. So we've got fall colors we're going to work with. So start with your vase with nice clean water. Add in your flower food so that your flowers have some nutrients and things to keep the water from growing bacteria. I've already got mine in there. And then you guys have a little bit of leather leaf that we're going to work with today too. So the leather leaf that came in the box we got this week, not sure if yours will have it or not, has little spores on the back. You can see those little dots. Those are spores. That is how the leather leaf basically propagates itself. They're little seeds. Do not worry, they are not bugs. They're nothing that are going to harm your home or your flowers. We're going to start with our greenery. I'm going to remove any foliage that would go below the water line. And I'm going to crisscross my stems as I place them into the vase. Depending on how big your pieces of leather leaf are, sometimes I will divide them into two pieces. I'll cut them between this lower lateral and this higher lateral, or higher tip of the leaf, and then cut it into two pieces. That way I can get more greenery and more stems. But sometimes too, if it's too big or these would go below the water line, you'd want to remove these. But then in this case, we wouldn't really reuse them. So by doing the cut there, you can use both pieces. But placing the stems at an angle, working my way around the vase, kind of my last stem, I am going to have a little bit more upright wherever it wants to sit to fill in the top of my vase. All right, next I'm going to go in with my Safflower. So these do have really long laterals. Depending on the size of your vase, you could cut these apart or you could leave them all as one stem. I'm going to try my first attempt with just leaving them all on one stem. But sometimes if you want a little bit more control of where they're going, you could certainly cut off those laterals. And I'm working with a 10 stem bouquet, so I have 4 stems of the Safflower, and I'm going to just kind of imagine that I'm placing them, if this were like a square, at each corner of that square around my vase so that I'm getting a nice round shape. Right now I'm really just kind of basing my vase. I'm going to base it with the greenery, base it with the Safflower, so that when I start to place some of the stems like the Gerbera Daisies that really like to move around, that there is more of a grid for them to go into to stay in place. And I love, some of them don't even aren't fully bloomed out, they just have the little buds. I love the look of those too. Okay, so next I'm going to go in with the Amarathus. Often you'll see Amarathus in shades of reds and crimson, but this biscuit color is definitely kind of the golden is more unique. Sometimes you'll see purples, which is more unique. It's just a really fun product to work with. So we get it often in as hanging Amarathus. We'll see it in wedding work a lot where it's more drapey, and we would use it draping out of the vase. This is more of an upright, even though it's got some drape to it. So this drapiness is not droopiness. Don't confuse the two. This is natural for it to do so. I am going to remove some of these lower laterals. Maybe I'll make a fun floral crown later and repurpose those. And I'm going to group these. I like asymmetrical arrangements. If you've been around for a while, you probably know that about me. So I'm going to group them off to the side. So when we read from left to right. So when working on arrangement that's asymmetrical, you typically want to have the height of your arrangement on the left side, and then the focal of your arrangement can be on the right side. So right now my arrangement is facing me when I'm arranging, that my height is on the left. To you it might look like it's on the right, but we'll spin it around once we once we finish up here. So I'm grouping my Amarathus together with the height on the left. And just because we read from left to right, that's more of a natural way our eye wants to move, that when you're looking at an arrangement and something feels a little off about it, maybe it's not quite balanced, it could possibly be that the height is on the right versus the left, and it's just not natural to our eye. So we're working with these Gerbera daisies. You might have assorted fall colors here. So when they come to us, they often will have these little straws on them. What these are for are just to support the stems and support the heads of Gerbera daisies. Gerbera daisies, sunflowers, flowers like that often have very heavy heads. We like the big full blooms, which is great, but it can cause them to droop faster because the heads are so heavy. So these straws help support them. Also, when we get them in, they come dry packed, meaning they don't come in a water source. So when that happens, having some sort of support on them can help them until we get them rehydrated. In your case, you're going to feel that if you're very firm, they're very hydrated. So you can certainly remove these if you want to. If you want to keep them on for extra support, you can do that as well. I am also going to show you how we would do it here in the store. We would remove the straw and then we would wire them. So we take a piece of florist wire. I don't really need the full length, so I'm going to cut it in half, and we would place this wire right up next to the head of the flower. Now, some people will teach you that you can poke it into the head. That's okay too. For my purposes, I feel like if I'm making another insertion into the flower, I'm just allowing a place for bacteria to grow. We want your flowers to last as long as possible, so I'm actually just going to place it right next to the stem. I'm going to take some florist tape, and I'm just going to pull off a section. And florist tape, the way it works is it wants you to give it a little bit of a stretch. When you give it a little bit of a stretch, it releases that tackiness that makes it stick to itself. So it's not going to stick to your stem or to your wire, it's going to stick to itself. So when you first begin, that's probably the trickiest part of just getting your wire to lay next to the stem, to start that initial wrap, and then I can work my way down, kind of pulling and stretching as I go. The ultimate goal is to have a really smooth look to your tape that it's not so noticeable. And when I'm working with Gerbera daisies, I like to use this brighter green shade of florist tape because it matches it perfectly. It also comes in a darker green. That's typically what we see that we can get from our wholesalers. Now, I was just over in Europe traveling and flowering, and they had so many more options when it came to tape and finishes and products. It was so interesting to see lots of stuff that we can't get here in the States. So then when you finish, you want to kind of work the tape back onto itself so that it's sticky and stays. And honestly, from a distance, I bet you can't even tell that there's tape versus the stem. Personally, I think this looks a lot better than the straws, but depending on your arrangement, sometimes you can hide these straws. It doesn't make a difference. So now that I have my Gerbera taped and wired, I can go ahead and place it into my arrangement. I'll go ahead and tape and wire these as well. So Gerbera daisies, to be really honest, are not always my favorite to work with. Because the way they are so front facing, they often want to do their own thing. So if you are doing bridal work with them, or maybe if you're doing nosegay bouquets for prom, often don't want to turn the exact direction that you have in mind. You do have to be flexible. You do have to work with the way that they want to move. So for instance, this yellow guy, I would really love if he would sort of look right at you, but that would also feel a little unnatural. That's not how they grow in nature. That's not how, it almost looks like two eyeballs there. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So it's okay. It's okay to work with them the way they are. I'm gonna bring it back a little bit. I'm gonna bring a little bit of my safflower down here in front to fill in that spot. And I'm not going to stress over it. I'm just going to enjoy it. So as I mentioned earlier, I gave my height to one side. So if you, the viewer, the height should be on the left and then my focal on the right. that that's the way that you are viewing it, that it's a little bit easier for your eye. Now the back side of my arrangement is not as full. This one's a little bit more one-sided, but depending on how you want to do your arrangement, you can certainly work some of your Amarathus around the back or maybe a little Safflower on the back. The whole point of this is to be creative, to have fun with it, and hopefully I've shared some tips with you today that will help with your arranging skills. I'm so glad you're here as a subscriber, and we'll see you again next month.